You can move a bit here, closer to the.
So, there was a Lita, Vishakha, Sridhama. Okay, so Vishakha, you would like to start? Which is the question you are taking?
We took the first question.
First one. You are taking the second or third?
We're all on the first question.
And then this is the third group then? Why the two groups? Oh, okay, sure. Okay, then that's now we have then Lalita and then we have Sridhama and who wants to be Madhavangal? Okay. Okay. Sridhama and Sridhama we can have. Yes, so come forward. Want to come forward? Are you okay with that? You can introduce yourself also. Where are you from?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sanvi, and we took the first question. So just to reiterate, the first question was, what do you think is the difference between the mind and the brain? So that was the first part. So I'll address that first. So basically, like based on our discussions, we realized that the brain is actually something more tangible, while the mind is something intangible. And the brain and the mind have a relationship where the mind really like affects the brain and like translates into the actions that we usually carry out in our daily lives. And we also felt that the mind is something like the conscience, and it kind of like takes the more emotional or like spiritual aspect of like the decisions that we take. And the second part of the first question was, to what extent is the mind affected by our brain's chemicals? And we didn't really decide to like which extent because we really didn't know. But we kind of discussed about how both the mind and the brain, both the mind and the chemicals of our brain kind of like translate into our actions that we do daily. So, and it's like a circle basically. So like the mind, which like influences our thoughts and opinions and beliefs, kind of like translates into the chemicals that are released, which affects the actions and like the brain's decisions. Yeah.
Okay, quite well articulated. Thank you. Anyone else would like to add anything? We have group, yeah.
Another thing that we discussed was
So this one, Meta. So before we move forward, so I will respond to many of the points later, but overall, I think it was well articulated, and point by point you went over all the questions, and it was nice that you all of you understood the question clearly. And it's not an easy question to answer because the subject itself is subtle, but well, thank you. Yes, please.
another thing I wanted to add was that like when we study about neuroscience and everything, we realize that actually all our brains are made of the same things. But despite that, I may feel a certain emotion differently or hold a different belief, and that itself sort of proves the existence of something beyond the brain, just the physical brain. So that, we thought that should be another reason for the existence of the mind in the first place, is the fact that we feel a certain belief or emotion differently, despite the gross body itself being the same for all of us.
So this question is still in mind. What you're saying is that there is we have fundamental beliefs which go beyond the brain chemistry. Is that what you're trying to say?
Essentially, that we are all like our gross. If all our gross bodies are the same, but despite that we still have different beliefs and different values, there has to be something beyond just the gross brain, and there has to be some mind or something that's controlling them.
Thank you so much. So the there are many ways we could do this. Not this, but so one way is that You make a presentation, I make some points about the presentation, then you go to the next question. Or you can all present first, and then you can have a question afterwards. How would you prefer? Second one. All of you like to make the presentations first? You don't want to forget what you prepared? Okay. So, sure, please. Who says? Ideally, let's go linearly with the second question. Who is addressing the second question? Which group? Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Raj. So the second question, the first part is why does our mind act as our enemy? So our mind acts as an enemy because it's practically a sixth sense to us. I mean, we use it to think. So there is sight, smell, touch, taste, feel. I think I don't know.
That's okay.
So I think thinking is our sixth one, and thinking also controls us a lot. So that's why it's practically a sixth sense to us. So since we're also told to control our senses, and senses is practically our enemy, so this is why we consider our mind as an enemy to us. We also think that our mind is.
If you have some notes, you can look at them also. Thank you. If two of you want to come together and present also, it's fine.
Our mind also acts as an enemy because the mind usually picks up on things that has been imprinted in our minds. It's also because our mind usually focuses on the history that has affected us mentally and emotionally.
Sorry. The mind focuses on?
Our mind is quite negative because it focuses on history that has affected us mentally and emotionally. Like,
okay, the history that has affected us.
yes. So, like, let's say, like, when if I do something very bad, it will stay in my mind because, like, the consequences that happen, like what happened after I probably got scolded by someone.
Speak to them, not to me.
So after it will stay in us for a while because we know that whenever we get scolded, yeah, it just sticks with us for quite some. It sticks with us. So usually our mind also thinks negatively because we're like, okay, we don't want to do that. So we think about the negative things all the time. This also makes us overthink, and that's how we feel negatively. Thus, it also becomes an enemy in some sort of way because when we think negatively, yeah, it puts an impact on us, on our thinking, sometimes making us make worse decisions on something. So that's it.
Okay. So it's up. So this is a difficult question. I think you're able to connect it with many other points about the senses being to be controlled and also how we get scarred or impacted from the experience from our past, and those will shape our thinking. Well, thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Will you applaud Sandhya when you spoke? Okay. Yeah, please.
Hare Krishna. The question 3, which is how exactly do you think meditation, spirituality, and bhakti help us manage our mind better? And so, firstly, meditation is God talking to us, while prayer is we talking to God. And
Sorry, slowly. Can you speak a little bit more loudly? I'm not able to hear you.
so, meditation is God talking to us, And prayer is me talking to God. And when we do both of these combined, it's like having a total conversation with God. And when we do this, God will help us with our challenges and questions. And meditation also helps us with resilience and helps us with our challenges.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead, please.
So how we divided the three aspects you mentioned in the question, which is spirituality, meditation, and bhakti. We divided into three stages of progression. Mainly, spirituality being the first stage, meditation being the second stage, and bhakti being the third stage. So, why we chose spirituality as the first stage is because spirituality helps to kickstart the positive mindset and helps us to understand that there is a God and there is something that can potentially help us to control our negative mind. Stage 2 is meditation, where we try to reach out to God to alleviate our negative thoughts in our mind. And the meditation is when we make an effort to reach out to God to alleviate our sorrows. And stage 3, which is bhakti, is us seeing God as the savior and us not wanting material desires and surrendering to God so that He can use us as so that we can get cured from the negative aspects of our mind. So if we follow these three stages progressively, little by little, taking small steps, our mind would slowly get accustomed to this, all this positive stuff that we're getting from Krishna consciousness. And by slowly making small steps in these three stages of progression, we will be able to cure the negative mindset in our mind.
Okay, excellent. This is quite a good analysis of the three levels: spirituality, meditation, and bhakti, and how they are progressing. So well articulated. Thank you so much. So, well done all of you. I think we had a little time to prepare. So, you compensated for our lateness. So, thank you for that. Okay. So, I'll just go over some of the questions that you addressed, and then we will take it forward, and if you have any further questions, we'll try to discuss them. So the point which you made about the brain being gross and the mind being subtle. So one way to understand this is to consider a three-level metaphor, that we have the soul, we have the mind, and we have the body. And all these three together comprise our self right now. So the self is presently three levels. There's the spiritual side, the mental side, the physical side. Now we could compare this to a computer system in which there is a hardware, software, and user. The soul is like the user, the body is like the hardware, and the mind is like the software. Now the brain is a part of the body. So in the metaphor, you could compare the brain to be like the CPU. So the central processing unit, the processor in a device, it's a physical thing. But the software is not physical. Even if we say that the software is located, stored in the C drive or the D drive or whatever, it's not that if you open the chip under some microscope, you can find something called a software stuck over there. It's not there like that. So it's subtle. And this whole mechanism works together very seamlessly. And the difference is that, so this is from a functional perspective, the brain is a part of the gross body, whereas the physical body and the mind is subtle. Now, another difference is that as souls, we outlive our bodies. The soul existed before we were born, and the soul will exist after we die. Now, the soul, when it goes to the next body, it goes with the mind, the subtle body. Now, in the mind there are many other things, but I want to keep this model as, in the subtle level there are other things, but I want to keep this as a minimalist model. So another way to understand this is, the soul is there, the mind is there, and around it the body is there. So you consider these to be three circles: soul, mind, and body. And then among these three, say when death occurs, and then the next birth occurs. So what happens is that the body falls. The body falls dead, and then the soul and the mind, they together, the soul and the mind rise upwards, and they go into the next body. And this is where birth occurs. So that's why, if you consider from the biological perspective, have any of you seen twins? They're not twins over here, right? Oh, we have?
My twin isn't here.
Sorry?
My twin is not here.
Oh, your twin is not here. So are you identical or not identical? Okay, not identical. Okay. Okay, nice. So, see, even if you consider identical twins, now identical twins means that genetically they are exactly the same. Not just in appearance, but even if you go to the genes, they are still the same. But yet, their personalities are different. So, where do our personalities come from? They don't just come from our genes. They come from the impressions in the mind. So the soul and the mind go together. So the two differences between the mind and the brain are, the mind is part of the physical body, sorry, the brain is a part of the physical body. It is destroyed at the time of death. It is left behind. But the mind along with the soul go to the next body. So, throughout when I'm explaining, since you also thought about this, if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I'll try to address them as much as I can. And now, apart from that, how exactly do we experience emotions or do we do actions? So, now there are brain chemicals, they are clearly a part of the brain. Now, there's another way to look at this is, if you consider these three levels, the soul, mind and body. And we have the brain over here. So now, in general, while these three are distinct, but they are interconnected. They are interconnected. Say, for example, if we see someone threatening or hurting someone we care for, then immediately we feel anger. So what has happened? We've seen something physical, and that physical info has gone through our eyes, through our brain, through our mind. And that's where we are experiencing some emotions. We are experiencing anger. Or if something dangerous happening, then we may feel some fear. So the physical affecting the mental is just natural. Now how does this affect actually the body, and especially the brain within it? It functions through electrochemical energy. So our nerves are activated through electrochemical energy. And that's why whatever we experience, it has associated with certain brain chemicals. Just like when we are using the hardware. So right now if I'm using this device, there is some electrical energy being used, the battery over here. And it's the battery that is powering it. Now I may write something meaningful, I may write something meaningless. I may write something pleasing, I may write something infuriating. Irrespective of what I write or what I use this for, In every use that I put this device for, the electrical energy of the battery will be involved. Isn't it? So similarly, the electrochemical energy of the brain is involved in everything that we do. But the electrical and chemical energy, it is not the cause. It is, the technical word is correlate. We can use the word simple channel. It is not the cause, it is the channel. That means, say, right now, I am writing something over here. And when I write something, the electrical energy of the device is used. But what exactly gets written over there is not determined by the electrical energy. It is determined by the user. So the brain is not the cause of the emotions. This is where many times modern medical science goes somewhat wrong. They say, for example, dopamine. You may have heard the word dopamine. All of you probably heard the word chemical dopamine. Dopamine hits when we watch something, when it's enjoyable, when we eat something enjoyable, we get a dopamine hit. So what happens is that it does affect. So can chemicals affect our emotions? Yes. Everything physical affects us. So if we eat some food, we experience some pleasure. And when we experience some pleasure, that will be reflected in the way our brain cells get lit up. But those brain cells being activated is not the cause of the emotion. It's like, say, somebody's happy and they smile. Now somebody can put on a very fake smile, like a secretary kind of smile. Now, when they put a smile like that, sometimes the smile can be genuine. But is the smile the cause of happiness or the expression of happiness? What do you think?
Expression.
If happiness is there and smile is there. So is smile the cause or smile the expression?
Expression.
So how many of you say expression? Okay, how many of you say cause? How many of you say you don't care? Okay. Thank you for being honest. Yeah. So now it is an expression. Now having said that, there is something, somebody is always, some truth to it that it can go other way also. If somebody is always with a long face, very glum, come on, cheer up, smile. So smiling can help a person to feel better. But it is only to a certain extent. If somebody is actually sick, smile and you'll feel better. No, how much can I feel better just by smiling? Now, if say the seat I am sitting on is filled with thorns, and you tell me, come on, think positive, just smile, you'll be happy. Well, there is an objective reality also, which cannot be just wished away. Okay? So, the cause of the happiness is not the brain states. The cause is somewhere else. That could be in external situations, something which has made us happy, or that could be in internal recollections. We might remember some happy moment in our life. That is not coming from the brain, that is coming from the mind, the memory. And then that triggers some chemicals to get activated in the brain at that time. Okay? So this is the first question. Now, any questions about the answers, please?
How do we know, from a skeptic's point of view, as you know, like let's say playing devil's advocate, how do we actually know if there is truly something else beyond the brain that is controlling? How do we know that?
Okay, good question. See, there is a lot of research right now going on in the whole field of consciousness. Neuroscience is one of the most active fields of intellectual warfare between materialistic and non-materialistic worldviews. So there are many books written on it. One of the books I read recently was called The Brain Wars. So the Brain Wars is basically, the mainstream idea within science right now is that the brain is everything. There's nothing beyond the brain. However, there are 2-3 different ways. One from a logical perspective and one from a more scientific experimental perspective to talk about it. So from the logical perspective, the brain is, in terms of its components, no different from the hand and is no different from the desk. It's ultimately, what is the brain made up of? It is made of atoms and molecules. Atoms and molecules are made up of some fundamental particles. So in terms of its building blocks, the brain is no different from anything else. And so the question comes up, how does matter ever develop the capacity to experience matter? Say, there's a gulab jamun. People keep the gulab jamun on the table. The table is not going to say, hey, this gulab jamun is delicious. The gulab jamun itself doesn't experience it as delicious. It is we who experience it. When I put it on my tongue, I experience it to be tasty. But my tongue is also just matter. It is also atoms and molecules ultimately. If I go to the brain also, it's atoms and molecules. It's no doubt much more sophisticated. But does the level of sophistication lead to a completely new category of experience, category of reality we experienced? See, what the brain can do, like we have AI now. AI can do phenomenal things. But ultimately, even the most sophisticated computer and the most sophisticated AI, it is just doing number processing. 010101. If you studied computer science a little bit, but it does it extremely fast. So just number crunching, no matter how fast we are able to do the number crunching, does not lead to the experience of anything. Isn't it? So we can use Photoshop or any software to make a beautiful image. But if we are to judge between 5 images, which is actually beautiful, Photoshop can tell us a lot about, okay, the color composition of this is like this is 25% this color, 13% this color, 7% this color. But actually, which is aesthetically beautiful. That is something which has to be experienced. And that is something beyond number processing. So the first argument is, from a logical perspective, the brain is simply matter. How can matter develop the capacity to experience matter? Now the second is that from a more scientific perspective, there are several experiments have been done, and one of the experimental findings or observations which lead people to say that the brain is, there's nothing beyond the brain, is that if some part of the brain is damaged, then the body's corresponding functionality goes down. If say the part of the brain is damaged, a person's hand doesn't move. Another part of the brain is damaged, then their memory may go away. Whatever. So things like that. Now this leads some people to propose that the brain is the source of the memories, the brain is the source of functionality, brain is the source of our behavior. However, that is not the only way to explain this. So if we go back to this particular model also, that the brain is like the hardware. The brain is a part of the hardware. Now, I might have a computer, I might have a phone, and if, say, the part of the phone where I press a particular key in the keyboard gets damaged, then I might not be able to type a particular letter. Isn't it? Now, does that mean previously when the letter was being typed, the phone itself was typing it? No, I was typing it. So just because certain hardware damage leads to certain functional incapacities, that does not necessarily mean the hardware originated that capacity. The hardware could be the instrument for doing that thing. So, I think it's become a little complicated for all of you. But, so that's the first thing. Now, second is a much more interesting experiment. I was in Canada, I was in Toronto, and there is the father of neuroscience. He's the whole lab dedicated to him, and he wrote a book called The Mystery of the Mind, among many other books. So he wanted to do an experiment to see where exactly in the brain is the seat of experience, the seat of agency. So I am experiencing this, I am doing this. So try to visualize this experiment. He had got a subject, and now we know that certain parts of the brain are associated with certain physical functions. So he asked the subject, raise your arm. And he raised his arm. And then he observed that a particular part of the brain was activated as expected. Then he asked this subject to lower his arm. He lowered his arm, and then that part of the brain got deactivated. Now this is Dr. Walter Penfield, that's the name of scientist. Then what did he do after that? He used external electrodes to activate that particular part of the brain. Now when he activated that part of the brain, the hand went up. He asked the subject, what happened? He says, my hand went up. Did you raise your hand? I did. You did. So then he deactivated that part of the brain. The hand fell down. So what happened? He says, my hand fell down. So did you lower your hand? He said, no, I didn't. You did. So now, what does this mean? See, if you consider, go back to the hardware metaphor. See, if there is a computer, and the computer has a print button to it, and then there is a printer nearby, and the printer, there is some connection between these two, and the printer has a hand which starts moving when you press the print button. Now, it may be my computer, and I press the print button, and the printer hand starts moving. Now, you can come and press the print button, and then also the print hand will start moving. So basically, the corresponding brain area is like the print button, and the printer is in this case like the hand. You have the printer hand, that's like our physical hand. So in the first case, so in the second case, it was Dr. Penfield who came and pressed the print button. He activated that part of the brain. Now in the first case, who activated it? Now Dr. Penfield suggested maybe there is some other part of the brain that is doing the activation. So he repeated the same set of experiments, the same set, raising the hand, lowering the hand, while activating other parts of the brain. And when other parts of the brain were activated, suddenly some memory would be activated. The person would remember some food that they had 20 years ago, or a phone call which they had made with someone, or the fragrance of the garden which they had visited a decade ago. So many memories would be triggered when different parts of the brain were activated. But no part of the brain, when activated, led the subject to feel that I am raising my hand. So his conclusion after almost 40 years of study was that the brain is a computer, but it is programmed from something outside the brain. So the source of consciousness is extracerebral. Anyone know what does cerebral mean? Cerebral is, like cerebrum is the brain. So extracerebral is beyond the brain. So from this logical perspective of matter being able to experience matter, and from the scientific experiment of no part of the brain stimulation giving that person the sense of being the agent. There are two simple ways. You can go into much more sophisticated analysis of consciousness. But there are two simple ways in which you can explain this. Okay? Thank you. Okay. So now let's move on to the second question. So the second question was, does your group remember the question? Why does the mind act negatively or act as an enemy? Why does it remember negative things?
Yeah.
That's perfect, thank you. So now see, the nature of life is, in life there are dualities. Kabhi khushi, kabhi gum. Sometimes happiness, sometimes distress. Now, while this is true, and sometimes you may portray this graph like this, but see, the nature of life is that if we are walking through a forest, if we miss some happiness, there is some loss. But if we miss some distress, by what do you mean by miss some distress? I'm talking about happiness means source of happiness. If we are walking through a forest and we miss seeing a beautiful flower, then okay, we miss the pleasure of seeing that flower. But if we miss a source of distress, say walking through a forest and we miss the sight of a snake, then there could be a huge loss. The snake can bite us, we can die immediately. Isn't it? So from a biological perspective, our body and our mind are designed in such a way that we are attuned to perceive the negative much more than the positive. Because the missing the positive can lead us to a little loss of pleasure. But missing the negative can lead to a lot of danger. So from the perspective of biological survival, it is beneficial for us to notice the positive, but it is essential for us to notice the negative. You understand the difference? That noticing this is beneficial. But noticing the negative is essential. Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, is it true that our mind wants everything to be perfect? That's why if anything dangerous or a mistake occurs, then our mind tends to overthink it in hopes of it not happening again.
Okay, I'll come to that. That's the next step slightly. I'm talking right now, let's start with the basic biology. For us, the basic point is missing danger will be far more costly than missing pleasure. So missing the negative, you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Biologically, do you mean like this guy's like primal survival instinct?
Yeah, exactly. So see, now there are some aspects of Darwin's theory of evolution which can be questioned, especially in terms of the chemical evolution. That whether from chemicals life came. But the basic fact that survival of the fittest, that's just the basic fact of life. It's not a fact that Darwin came up with. And the fact is always there. The Bhagavatam also says, Jivo Jivasya Jivana. So there is danger in this world. So now, from the perspective of biology, now we can move towards psychology. Psychology is the study of the mind, biology is the study of the body. So there are three ways in which the mind's being attuned to the negative. So mind attuned to the negative. That is in one sense positive for survival, or not only for survival, or for danger detection. But this same feature can malfunction. Malfunction when? In three ways. See, when the danger is subtle or almost intangible, invisible. Say, if I see a slithering snake or if I see a charging tiger, then it's a danger. But in today's world, for most of us, the dangers that we face are not that tangible. The danger could be that somebody can spread a malicious rumor about us. The danger can the global economy can crash. The danger can be that maybe somewhere in the world a nuclear bomb explodes. Or somewhere in the world a war starts, and because of that whole global supply chain gets disrupted and the prices increase, and then we don't have enough food to eat. So what happens is, because the dangers in the world are today are very subtle, so the mind is not just alert to the negative, it stays constantly in the negative mood. Because the mind is alert to see dangers, but when the danger is like a omnipresent fog, then the mind tends to become more negative. Because there's always some danger, but there's no danger specific to zero in on. So that's why the mind's attuning to danger becomes a problem. The second is that there is media overexposure. the bad things have always happened throughout human history. If you just, when you have studied history, you see there are always wars happening and people being killed and terrible things happen, famines and these things. But now with the media, we see bad things happening constantly. And movies show violence. News report brutalities. So what happens is, our mind gets exposed to the negatives far, far more than what it is habituated to naturally, or what it is prepared for naturally. Now, of course, this applies to desires also, and that's why our desires also start becoming more and more. But the mind starts becoming habituated, or rather the mind starts becoming overexposed to the negative. And because it is overexposed to the negative, so then again it starts staying in that perpetual fear or negative mode. And the third thing that happens is, so one is, in one sense, the reality of the world. Then the other is the problem of the depiction of the world. That how the world is depicted to us. In the past, if some event happened somewhere, probably, I'm not talking about the Satyuga past, I'm talking about the recent historical past. It would probably, a telegram has to be sent, it will reach after a day or two, or news would travel after a week in some ways. So it takes time. When the Titanic sank, for the relatives to be notified. Many of them, they got a notification after a month or so. The Titanic has sunk and your relatives are no more or whatever. So the depiction is much more. And the third problem is that in today's world, our mind is scarred. That there are scars on the mind. And I'll go into the scars a little bit later in the next answer also. But what do I mean by the scars on the mind? That because of these, the negative gets replayed. Replayed not just repeatedly, but sometimes relentlessly. Relentlessly, repeatedly means again and again. Relentlessly means never stopping at all. And sometimes a TV show is there. Okay, if you missed it, it's going to broadcast in the morning, it's going to broadcast in the evening. It's repeated. But relentlessly means the TV doesn't show anything at all. That's all is going on all the time. Sometimes it happens like that. So our mind can get scarred. So that's why the mind tends to be negative for us. And the mind tends to gravitate towards the negative much more. It remembers the bad things. It craves for those things that are not good for us. The same thing applies for this also. I'll talk about the temptations and the pleasures separately. But these scars of the mind, in Sanskrit, they are referred to as samskaras. Samskar. How many of you heard the word samskar? Any of you? Samskar? Only a few of you? Samskar you not heard otherwise? Okay. So samskar can be called as the impressions in our mind. But samskar, you can also write it in English as samskar. So everybody's mind has some scar or the other. And what does a samskar do? Say right now, if somebody is behind me and they want my attention, so they tap me on my shoulder. And they tap me on the shoulder, ah! Scream. What happened? I just gently tapped you. And I tell them, actually, I have a sprain in the shoulder. I've fallen before. I fall on the shoulder. Oh, okay. So generally, when there is an injury, then what happens is, small stimuli, large reaction. So what applies to the body also applies to the mind. So samskara, the presence of the samskara can be seen by small stimulus and large reaction. So for example, say somebody was bitten by a dog in their childhood. Now, whenever they see a dog, what happens is that triggers the memory of having been bitten. And the dog might be just a cute, tender, tiny poodle. But still that dog becomes reduced to its sharp teeth. And the sight of the dog creates fear. So small stimulus, large response. So our mind has also had many samskaras within it. And because of these samskaras, what has happened is the fear or the negatives, oh, this person spoke like this means this will go wrong, this will go wrong, this will go wrong, this will go wrong. Like that, it starts overwhelming. It starts replaying more and more and more. Now, of course, samskaras can work the other way also. Like suppose if I am injured, sometimes when a part of the body is injured, it becomes deadened. It doesn't get any sensation. So somebody may tap me on my shoulder, tap me on the shoulder, tap me on the shoulder. And if I have no sensation over there, they may tap and they may punch. Nothing happens. So like that, some people are just desensitized. That they seem to be heartless. They don't feel any emotion at all. So you mentioned, I think, the faculty of conscience. The conscience comes from a much deeper source, but basically our capacity to pursue pain or pleasure, that is also affected by the impressions in our mind. So if somebody says a butcher's child, and they have habitually from the childhood they have seen, say, fish or chicken or whatever being killed, and they themselves catch a chicken and cut off its neck, cut off its legs. And now, for them, cutting chicken will be the way we might cut sabji. They're completely nonchalant. They might be chatting with someone, watching TV, joking, and they're killing life over there. But what has happened is they have become desensitized to it. So essentially, our mind also has scars. And when somebody has, for example, how many of you have heard this word PTSD? What does it mean? Post-traumatic stress disorder. So basically what happened is, suppose somebody was on the war front and they saw an explosion right next to them, and maybe a friend was blown apart. Then after that, whenever they hear some loud noise, then it triggers the memory of that particular trauma. And they might overreact, they might start trembling, they might look for a gun, they might hit someone, or become in a fight or flight mode or something, or freeze mode, whatever. So what has happened over there is, the mind has become scarred. So that's why our mind tends to register the negatives much more. And now, this is related to the previous question, the second part of the question. Why does the mind act as our enemy? Now the mind is like, see, the mind, if you consider this to be the mind, inside the mind there are samskaras, there are the impressions. And some of the impressions within it are negative. And some of them are also positive. So we all have some happy memories also. Say if we saw someone in our childhood, maybe our parents or our elder sibling or some other person, we saw them being very courageous while in danger. Then seeing that example may also inspire us. Remembering that may get imprinted in our mind, and even when there is danger, we have very strong nerves and we don't collapse because of fear. So we can have both kind of impressions inside us. So there can be negative and there can be positive. So the both kinds of impressions are there in our mind, but quite often the negative impressions are more than the positive, or the negative impressions are more active than the positive. So it's technically, when you talk about the enemy, it is not the mind that is the enemy. It is the impurities in the mind that are the enemy. So that's why Krishna says, when we learn to purify our mind, it will become our friend. So the mind is not the enemy, what is inside the mind is the enemy. So you know, in the Second World War, America and Japan fought. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor over here only, in this part of the world itself. Not very far from here. So, but the thing is that now are Japan and America still enemies? What do you think? Are they enemies? No, they are friends. Although America bombed Japan, and America is the country which dropped the atom bombs. No other country has dropped atom bomb on any other country like that. So we could call it a terrible act of aggression. The worst act of aggression in human history. And yet after that, America and Japan are friends. So why is that? Because in one sense, it was not Japan that was the enemy of America. It was certain power-hungry people or certain politicians, certain leaders who had an imperialistic agenda. And they were out to conquer the world. And when they were disempowered, when they were removed from power, then afterwards, Japan and America became friends. So Japan was not the enemy. There are some people inside Japan that were the enemy. Like that, our mind is not our enemy. But there are these negative impressions, these impurities are the negative impressions. These are our enemy. And if those negative impressions could be removed, then our mind will also become our friend. Okay? Any questions about this? Yes, please. Okay, so your question about perfection? Yes, to some extent, we could say that our expectation that things should be perfect leads us to become angry or leads our mind to go out of control. That is true, but you know, the expectation that things should be perfect is not an expectation that anybody can sustain for very long throughout life. Because just a little experience of life starts making us understand that even I am not perfect. Nobody around me is perfect. So we can say we sometimes have over expectation of how things will be. We rarely expect perfection, but we often have over expectation. So in general, from a functional perspective, functionally, agitation is a result of the distance between expectation and reality. So agitation specifically, you can call it frustration. So frustration is a function. So if this distance is great, then the frustration is high. But if say my expectation is low and the reality is a little lower than that, then what happens is the frustration also is quite low. So if I go to a particular place expecting a feast, and then there is only like khichdi and some sabji over there, I'll feel irritated. But if I go to a place knowing that, okay, there's going to be some food there, but simple food there, then what happens is, okay, I'm not frustrated by that. So it's not so much the reality that frustrates us. It is the expectation that we bring to the reality, or the expectation that we bring to the situation, and then the mismatch between the expectation and the reality that frustrates us. Does that address your question? Or your question is something else?
Yeah, that's
Go ahead. No, it was the same question?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So now, I will just finish with the last question. So the last question was, how do spirituality, meditation and bhakti help us to manage our mind? So basically, life is filled with ups and downs. That is just the way life is, and whether we are spiritualists or materialists, it is going to be like that. Now, quite often, what the mind does is, it overreacts. Something is wonderful, it goes way up, it goes way down. So, for example, if you go to school and say a teacher praises us, hey, you're quite intelligent, you're a smart boy, you're a smart girl. People say, oh, this is the best school in the world, I love this school. And next day we go to school and then some teacher says, you're so lazy, you're so irresponsible. What a terrible school, I hate this school, why did I even go to the school? Isn't it? So, like that it can happen to relationships also. One day, you say, I love you, I can't live without you. Next day, I hate you, I can't live with you. So, the dualities are there in the world, but our mind exaggerates them. The mind goes way up and goes way down. So what spirituality does is, basically, if you consider the example of ocean. Now, in an ocean, waves are going to come. And some waves might be small and we might be able to stay steady. But if a large wave comes, we will be shaken. So if the wave is big and we are very small, then we will be thrown away by the wave. Isn't it? And if the wave is big, and even if we are big, sometimes the wave can be so big that we will just be thrown away. But say if I am here somewhere, then as the wave goes up, it will take me up, wave goes down, it will take me down. But if I can find some firm object, something like an anchor to hold on to, then what will happen is, I cannot stop the waves from coming, but that anchor can, if I hold on to the anchor, then I can stay steady. So, we talk this three things. We talk about spirituality in general, meditation, and bhakti. So spirituality basically tells us that an anchor exists, that there is something unchanging beyond the changing in the world. So anchor exists means there is something unchanging. There are many things in the world and almost everything changes. We ourselves change, our looks change, our age changes, our IQ level may go up and down, our wealth changes, the world's climate changes, everything changes. But is there something that's unchanging? There is something. So, it's like in our life also, so if we face some sudden danger, we might feel some fear. But amid the danger, say if we have a friend or a father or a parent or some elder who is very calm and steady, then we think, it is alright, it is okay. Then seeing their unchanging disposition, we feel calm. See, the more things change, the more we need something that doesn't change to hold on to. So spirituality tells us there is something unchanging that will not be affected by the ups and downs. Now meditation helps, it is a tool by which the mind can be focused on the unchanging. Now there can be different kinds of meditations. Some people might just meditate on do deep breathing and meditate on the breath. Things in the world keep changing, but our breath is constantly going in and out, going in and out. So if somebody is getting very angry about something, they're told, take a few deep breaths. This person, how could they behave like I want to hit back at them? Just focus on your breath. That's something which is unchanging in reality. Now, it may not be permanently unchanging. Our breath also ends when we die. But at least within this life, it's unchanging. So we focus on the unchanging. Now some people will chant the mantra Om. Or sometimes meditation, people just say, I'll look at the sky, I will look at some light, I'll look at a candle. So the idea is, have something steady to focus. And that will calm our mind. Now, the difference between bhakti and meditation, meditation can be many types. Bhakti also involves meditation. But in meditation, it is that we are trying to go toward the unchanging. But bhakti tells us that the unchanging is also trying to reach towards us. That the unchanging is not just a passive reality. It's not just an anchor that we are trying to hold on to. It's the living, loving person. Say, if we are being swept away by a storm and a very strong swimmer comes, and now we can try to catch hold of the swimmer, but the swimmer is also trying to catch hold of us. So Bhakti tells us that our attempt to focus on the unchanging is not just a one-way process. It's not just we who are trying to reach the Lord is also trying to reach us. And Bhakti makes the process in one sense. It is we are trying to reach the unchanging, but the unchanging is also trying to reach us. You know, in Damodar Leela we have this two-finger shot. One is our endeavor, the other is Krishna's mercy. So we try to endeavor, that is we try to fix our mind in Krishna. And Krishna's mercy is that He reaches out to us. And that's how the mind starts becoming calmer. Because the mind gets an unchanging object to focus on. And Krishna, I'll make this last point, my last point and stop. Krishna is not just the unchanging. He's the unchanging reality, but he is also the uncontaminated reality. He is all pure. You know, contamination means impurity. So he's uncontaminated. He's uncontaminated reality. So what happens is, because he's uncontaminated, because he's pure, when we focus on him, we also become purified. So our mind, it becomes cleansed. And cleansed means what happens? See, the impure mind is, if you consider the mind like this, the impure mind may have, say, a large percentage of negative impressions and only little positive impressions. This is the impure mind. But when this mind is, when we practice bhakti, bhakti means we try to remember Krishna, we try to focus our mind on Krishna. And by that what happens is, the mind starts becoming purified. And as it becomes purified, then the impure impressions, they start going away. Even if they are there, they are like very little. They just go away with time. So this is the pure mind. And the pure mind will be characterized by two things. It will be peaceful. It will not get agitated by small things. But it won't just be peaceful, it will also be purposeful. It will have, okay, this is important for me, this is what I focus on, this is what I will do. So that is how the mind that is connected with Krishna, that is habitual practice of bhakti, will become purified and will become peaceful and purposeful. Okay? So I'll quickly summarize what I discussed today. We discussed three main questions, and we discussed the answer to the question. Basically, we're trying to understand the mind. The first was, that is the mind and the brain are different, in the sense that the mind is subtle, the brain is gross. So soul, mind, body, and within that is the brain. And this is like the CPU, the body like the hardware, the mind like the software. The CPU, the processor basically. The whatever processor, the chip is there in the device which makes it function. And then we discussed how that everything that we do, so all actions, they involve brain chemicals. Just like all actions using a device involve electrical energy. But the brain chemicals, they are not the cause. They are the channel. Just as the electric energy is not the cause of what is being written on this device. It is the channel through which it will be. I might be writing, but the battery is discharged. I won't be able to see anything on the device. But that does not mean that the battery is the cause of what is being written. And then, so is there anything beyond the brain? So we discussed 2 points to answer this question. How does matter experience matter? Because we discussed how the brain is made of the same chemicals, same basic building blocks as the hand or the desk. But how does the brain experience anything? How does the brain experience consciousness? And then I talk about Wilder Penfield's experience, that the experiment about how activating the brain, so activating the particular area of the brain leads to the hand moving up and down, but it doesn't give the sense of agency. The second point we discussed is about why is the mind so negative? So on a positive side, it is because pain can lead, like detecting pain is essential. Detecting pleasure is beneficial. If you see something beautiful, that's good. But if you miss something dangerous, you can die. So minds being attuned to the negative is good in one sense. But this becomes negative in today's world because of three reasons. Dangers today they're intangible, they're not subtle. Most of the dangers are not something which you give a physical form to. And then there is the media overexposure is there. And beyond the media overexposure, there are the scars in our mind. And the scars in our mind, you can call them samskara. What it means is a small stimulus and a large response. This is how, say, trauma or PTSD or something like that occurs. So because of this, our mind tends to act negative. Our mind is not intrinsically an enemy. So what is the enemy is? Not so much the mind, but the impurities within the mind. Just like Japan was not the enemy of America, it is certain people within Japan who are the enemy of America. So if those people are removed, then there can be harmony, friendship restored between them. And then lastly, we discuss about how spirituality, meditation, bhakti purifies. So I talked about the concept of the anchor. The world will have ups and downs, and the mind will overreact to them. But if you don't want that to happen, then we need to have an anchor that we can hold on. So spirituality tells us the anchor exists. Meditation, what it does is, the anchor is reachable. It gives a process. Okay, there might be an unchanging, but how do I reach? So meditation gives us process by which makes the anchor reachable. And bhakti tells us the anchor is reaching out to us. And by the practice of bhakti, what happens is, the impressions that are there within the mind, many of them may be negative, but they become cleansed. So the impure impressions, initially they are a lot, but over a period of time, through purification, they become much, much lesser. The pure impressions become much, much more. And this is what happens through the practice of bhakti. And by this, what will happen? The mind will become, the pure mind is two things. Do you remember? Peaceful and purposeful. So it can stay, doesn't get upset by small things, but at the same time, it can stay focused on a particular purpose. And this is how we all can learn to better manage our mind, and whatever talents God has given us, whatever higher dreams and aspirations we have, can fulfill them as a service to the Lord and in service of others. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Charan Prabhu ki
Jai.
jai.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Do you have questions?
Okay, one or two questions.
Okay, 2 questions.
I don't want to delay all of you too much. Thank you for your patience. Yes, please.
Mike, take mic close.
Thank you. So basically, just now you mentioned about like the mind being negative because of the overexposure to media and news and stuff like that. I mean, that is definitely an aspect that we should be aware of, right? But at the same
it's a good question. Thank you. See, I did not imply it can come off as an implication. That is not my implication though. That when I say there's overexposure, I'm just telling you this is a fact of reality today. So it's more of a description than a prescription. That this is how it is. It's like there are so many temptations in the world today. But we can't go around with closed eyes. So basically there are two main things that agitate the mind. There are many, but the mind is agitated primarily by two things: desire and fear. Oh, this is so wonderful, I want to get it. If I don't get it, my life is ruined. I must get it. Desire agitates it. And fear, oh, this is so terrible, if this happens, my life is over. The world is come crashing down. So, desire and fear are two things. Now, in between comes anger. When we have something we desire and we're not getting it, and that leads to anger. And when we have something we fear and it doesn't go away, we have to keep dealing with it, then anger comes up. But basically, the reality of life today is that we are exposed to a lot of negativity, and that's why our mind is agitated. Now, what can we do about it? Well, two main things. That there has to be this overexposure. When we say that, can we just shut it out? Obviously we can't. So what we can do is, first is regulation. Some amount of regulation. Say for example, somebody might decide that, okay, I'm going to read news, or maybe after I have done a certain amount of work every day. There's some emergency, somebody might tell me. But it's not that I have to keep looking at news all the time. So some people may decide that, okay, after 9 o'clock only I look at my social media, or I'll turn on my news. The world is not going to end just because we don't look at the news. So some amount of regulation each one of us to create. And what it will be, that will vary. In the name of awareness, there are so many news channels. See, even one newspaper, like New York Times, if you take up now, online is available. If you decide to read the whole New York Times, the whole 24 hours will not be enough. It's a big newspaper. So nobody can read it, if you want to really read it properly. So we naturally are going to select what we are going to be exposed to. So rather than someone else doing the selection for us, we can do the selection. So regulation, in the sense of selection, is going to happen. Selection can be either done by us or by someone else. There's only options. So it is consciously done or unconsciously done. But that is important, some amount of regulation. But the second more important thing is redirection. Redirection means all of us need some time every day when we shift our mind away from all the changing things of this world and fix it on something higher. So we pray to Krishna, we chant his holy names, we connect with something higher. But the body needs rest, the mind also needs rest. Now in many ways, the purpose of entertainment is to give some rest to the mind. But nowadays, often the entertainment also agitates the mind, rather than relaxing the mind. So maybe going for a nature walk, doing some deep breathing, doing some praying, doing some journaling, something which redirects our mind away from whatever is the changing and agitating things. What are those things? We have to turn away from them. So that way we can protect ourselves. We certainly can't be completely disconnected. Thank you. Any one more last question?
I have a question. In a skeptic's point of view, right? If I'm a skeptic, then I would
say, how are we simply supposed to make the mind believe that the unchanging is coming towards us? Alright, because our mind would want the immediate satisfaction
that is supposedly there, right?
Okay. See, two broad things. See, when we practice something like meditation, broadly speaking, if it's more a mechanical form of meditation, like breathing, if we just learn to breathe, do regular deep breathing, we will find that if we just start breathing deeply, our mind will become calmer. So the thing is that with respect to the mind, there can be two different things. There is pacification of the mind, and then there is purification of the mind. So pacification means like peace. It's a pacify is somebody agitated, pacify them. So now, like some people are protesting and are protesting, they're becoming violent. Some politician comes and promises them, we'll address this concern. They become pacified. Now the concerns have actually not been addressed, but at least at that time they have been assured. So in one sense, pacification is temporary. It is purification that will be lasting. So just by deep breathing, we can pacify our mind. And we will find that this is relatively predictable. Whenever somebody starts feeling angry, whenever somebody starts feeling irritated, just take some deep breaths. So you will find that there is this, if I do this much deep breathing, this much stimulus, then I'll get that much response. But when it comes to bhakti, it's not like that. In bhakti, one day we may do kirtan and we may feel so much energy, you want to dance in ecstasy and keep dancing. Another day we start doing kirtan, okay, it's nice, it's not all that great. What next is there? When will this get over? We will experience this even more than kirtan and japa. So what is happening is over here is that sometimes our stimulus is this much and the response will be this much. It's the same stimulus, the same mantra we sing, and some days what we are experiencing is way more than that. Now somebody will say, okay, kirtan is just singing, you sing any song, you experience happiness. It is true to some extent. If a person likes music, if a song is well sung, any song can give us some joy. But the joy that comes, the peace that comes from singing Krishna's kirtans, that is way much more. And on other days, the stimulus is this much, the response will be much lesser.